I try not to get in a category. I do realistic, I do surrealistic, I do Baroque type horses, I do performance type horses, and then when I'm commissioned, I'll do quarter horses and Arabians, and I'll do them in the same passionate way, trying to keep them fresh and ripply and full of movement. Bronze is a whole different ballgame, and the clay work, the most risk you take is when you push the clay and it can't handle it and it blows up in the kiln. There's your poison there. But bronze, there's so many steps that, I mean, what you're shooting for is your original concept, and there's like 4 different steps a bronze has to go through, and very often the complaint with people who work in bronze is, oh, it doesn't look like my clay sculpture. Well, unless you are well versed in bronze, and you can do everything from the clay model, the armatures, the bones, and that's the most important. That's like I just spoke about gesture. That's where you start with you see your sculpture in a stick. And if you can't see your sculpture in a stick, then you're gonna have a rough time by the time it gets into metal that you can't push around. Anyway, the beauty of working in bronze is you have a lot more freedom because you can go big and go wild. You can have them bouncing on one foot. Everything you can't do in a solid clay or hollow clay sculpture, because you've got the metal armature in there. And you can use any type of clay on the metal armature. I tend to work bigger, so there's a lot of wrapping process, a lot of extra metal that I put on the armature just to beef it up. Now you've got to they're called sprues. They're just big tubes, big, like usually about 1 inch wide, a network of tubes and that attach all over the sculpture. And you have to know how the bronze is going to flow. It's a gravity pour. All large bronzes are gravity pours. So you've got to know, it's called a gating system, what's likely to happen when the bronze is poured into the next mold. You've got to kind of envision this and make your gating system by melting these big wax sprues on all around your piece. And then it all comes up to a funnel, which is basically a Dixie cup that's been dipped in a lot of wax, and then a wood plate on the top. And that's just so when you are making the next mold, which is a liquid and a powdered silica, and your piece is going to take a lot of abuse. You've got to have that stability, and that's why you have to put a platform on the top. You have to like almost be an engineer to figure out how the bronze is going to pour through. If you don't do, it still leaves this huge mystery. People think you pour bronze in a rubber mold. You can't. You'll be wearing it. So when the piece is almost finished, you almost have about a 1/2 inch of this ceramic slurry built up over your wax. Then you wrap it with wire, and then you just do your final coatings, and then it's ready to be fired. That gets fired in a big gas furnace prior to the bronze pour. That's the mold. It's called, you've heard of lost wax, you've heard of a waste mold. When that mold gets fired, all the wax that was underneath of it melts out, and you're left with this big white concrete looking ceramic slurry mold. And that's got to heat up to a certain temperature, and at the same time you're heating up the bronze. And this is all, it's a big process. I mean, we don't do that here. We don't, I worked at a foundry for a lot of years, and in college I helped with bronze pours, but when you get big, the crucibles, I could fit in the crucible. You get stuff like that, and big machinery that tips it. And it's big, and it's hot, and it's scary, and it's a guy job. I've worked on life-size bronzes in 95-degree South Florida, no air conditioning, and everything warps. And then you've got a problem, because if your wax warps, and it's a large piece that has to be welded onto another piece that warped, well, then you've got two, everything's askew, and then you really got to do some clever banging when the piece is in bronze so it meets and you can weld them back together. I spent 53 hours grinding metal in the blazing heat, and I've got 2 life-size sculptures in a gallery, and I look at them and you marvel a little bit. You're like, when you're all showered off and you're in a dress and you have a glass of wine and you're looking at these huge sculptures that you did from point A to the finished product, except when the guy pours the bronze for you. I mean, it's neat. It's special. I mean, you don't sit there and gloat, but you just have this inner peace, like, yeah. Yeah, it's a relief that you're able to do that. And you didn't just take your sculpture, drop it off at a foundry, and then come back 4 weeks later and you're bitching about no eyelids. But that's why I have to do it all myself.